Hi, and welcome to Soul and Science, a podcast on uniting Western psychology with Eastern wisdom. My name is Nyana, and I'm a psychotherapist residing in India and in conversation with Ardaas ji, who is an international trainer in yogic wisdom, and he is from Portugal. We invite you to embark on a profound exploration of the human journey with us. We integrate scientific insights into the mind with Eastern wisdom on life's polarities, paradoxes, and boundless nature to uncover a deeper understanding of our existence. Season 1, we begin with the exploration of relationships and the part that leads back to the self. Why relationships? We are constantly engaging in relationships with everything around us, from people to our environment. While we usually focus on relationships between two people, the most profound relationship we have is with ourselves. How many of us are truly aware of this relationship we have? Do we nurture it, trust, love, and respect it? Or are we living in fear and rejection of self, waiting to be validated externally? So join us as we go deep dive into the relationship with our mind, our body, and our spirit. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our topic today, which is on the conversation around responsibility and fate to destiny. Ardaas ji, thank you for joining us as always. Is there something you would like to begin with?
Well, thank you, Nyana, for organizing as usual, and thank you everyone for connecting. Um, there is no particular start, maybe just the concept that we were just talking about karma, and we were talking about choices and conscious choices from a neutral space, aligned with truth, conscious choices. So today's conversation is going to be around those choices are going to have responsibilities. So what's the consequence of committing to some choice? That the consequence is that now you're responsible for whatever you committed to, and that's going to affect what's coming. And whether what's coming is future, well, that future, whether it's fate or destiny, that's something that maybe we need to define and describe, but that's going to be linked to the concept of karma, which we were just talking about. So today's conversation is going to be kind of drawing from the previous to the last one about karma, and the last one about making choices. That would be my introduction to today.
Yeah. So I'm going to begin with then the definition of responsibility from a psychology perspective, which is the ability to accept the consequences of one's choice. Um, and it is talked about the capacity and the experience of the individual to A, make that choice, and B, then to hold the accountability and to the consequences of those choices. And that's more of a psychological sort of understanding of responsibility. And in addition, it also looks at the responsibility to what is occurring in and around us and what that means for the individual. And it's slightly more nuanced than that because it talks about um, the freedom of choice, like we talked about last time. So when I'm facing the consequences, is it fair or not? Because is my choice conscious and free, or is it compelled and compulsive? Right. And then that goes into a whole nuanced discussion, which we brought up last time as well. If we talked about, like, is it truly a free choice? Is it truly something that I can have, therefore, to stand behind the choice that I make? And therefore,
We did talk about that. Can you clarify the aspect about whether it's fair or not? What do you mean by that?
so the definition suggests that the person is aware of the choice that they're making, and therefore will there is a responsibility to face the consequence of that choice.
So
What
are you saying that by definition we are only responsible of the choices that we make aware when we are aware?
No, that's where it comes in. that's where the whole conversation around the fairness, and that's also looked at it really from the angle when we look at it, with a lot of people say, but this is not fair. I haven't, I didn't know. And we look at it also psychologically in when we look at the law and things like that. So I'm looking at it from a slightly larger perspective, and that whether the person is aware or ignorant of the choices. But what they say is that that does not exempt you
Hmm.
from receiving the consequences of your choices, because that is natural law. And that is really what psychology really steps upon, is that there is a natural law, and that law does not exempt the ignorance, and that it's important, therefore,
Right.
the journey of the human being is to get the knowledge that he or she needs
Right.
in order to make informed and aware choices. And so there's a lot of emphasis in psychology around knowledge, self knowledge, what is driving my choice, what did that happen, and also because we look at, when the mind is incapacitated, what choices are we making, from that angle, about fair and justice. But whether or not that is the case, the natural law is defined, its cause and effect, and that we will all have to face the consequences of the choices that we make, and therefore the invitation to have the knowledge and the awareness.
Right. So we are not exempt from our responsibility just because we were not aware, which means we better get ready so that we make as many conscious choices as we can, because any unconscious choice, we are also going to be responsible for that. Right.
Absolutely.
And even if it came out of ignorance, well, we are responsible for our own ignorance as well, our own ignorance as well. So it's knowing this and knowing that actions have consequences. And this is where the understanding of the law of karma comes in. If you understand that, then you are going to want to prepare to make as many conscious choices as you can.
Yes, absolutely. Is when you talked about karma and its consciousness, and that's where it comes in, right? That you're conscious of every thought, word, and action. And it's driven from a particular place of consciousness.
Correct.
And if you're not conscious, there are still the consequences. And when that isn't fully accepted, then we go into this conversation of fate versus destiny.
Yes. I mean, right. We are also responsible for the actions that we are not aware of, but I believe they are ameliorated. So, for example, there is a certain karma with eating meat. There's a pain and a suffering that is caused to animals just by the fact that we are eating them. And there is different kinds of way that this meat is provided, and some are more suffering than others, and that's going to take more or less karma. So the Western way that we utilize meat is going to be quite much more karmic than a person in a village somewhere in the mountains where they have grown those animals and they were free and they were relatively happy in their environment, and then they were killed. So there's going to be less impact on that because of the suffering that you are inflicting of the creature, but there is still a certain amount of karma. Now, if we when we are children, the if our parents never tell us about this, we don't know any better. So we are ignorant, right? And whatever we are eating, if our parents are giving us meat, we are eating that meat, and that meat already has that charge, that
Mm.
karmic charge within it. So there's going to be part of that that's going to be karmic for us. And well, you would say, well, that's unfair because it's not you. It was your parents' choice to make you eat meat. You were just, um, you know, you were not, you didn't have any say in that, right? You didn't have any choice. Your parents gave you that meat to eat. And yet, at the same time, in yoga, we say we choose our family. The
Mm.
soul chooses which family to be born into. So by we being in a family which is meat, that's not an excuse because we chose that family that it's meat as well. And when we incarnate into that family, we choose to accept the karma that is associated to that family. I think we mentioned that already, but that means also whatever karma is as a result of eating meat, that's going to be because I chose to be born in that family. Now, that's going to be a very, very small amount compared to the adult. Let's say that very same child, as he grows or she grows and becomes an aware adult, and then he or she understands the impact of what we do with the animals and how we grow them, how we kill them so that you can eat. And that's not necessary because you could have a vegetarian lifestyle, it's no problem. So the moment that the adult becomes aware of this, if he or she continues, even though they know what they do, if they continue choosing to eat meat, that's a different issue. So that karma is going to be stronger in a way. So the consciousness with which we do things is going to have an impact. But just because we are ignorant does not mean we don't have any karma. So there is a little bit of this fairness that you were saying that's unfair. There is a little bit of fairness in that sense that the amount of consciousness with which you do things is going to have a more impact. If you know you are harming yourself and you continue smoking, then well, you are creating a strong karma, right? If you weren't aware of it, and in the 1940s, 50s, the doctors would recommend to smoke and things like that. I don't know if maybe it was even earlier than that. Then you're not aware. Then where is the karma? Maybe you feel it that is not good for you. But at the moment that you become aware of the impact that it has and you still carry on smoking, well, then you're responsible for that. And you can say, well, I cannot stop it. Well, you have a choice, you have a capacity. And some people's capacity to stop some habits are easier than others. For some people, it's easier than others. But we all have this kind of free will that you were mentioning. And so we can change the impact of those decisions. So this ignorance, it also plays out within the law of karma. But yet, ignorance, like you mentioned, that's a very, very important topic in yoga because that would be the root of the appearance of the ego, and the things that we like we get attached, the things that we don't like we feel aversion towards them, and the fear of losing those which we are already attached to. So aversion, attraction, aversion, ego, all this comes from ignorance, avidya, what we call in yoga. So avidya will be one of the key elements, and that's why we meditate, and we don't just sit in doing some yoga postures, but we practice something that is going to, how do you say that, self-knowledge or self-awareness, right? To awaken the sense of self and understanding. And that's a yogic part that we do in the mind also to understand better, and which you could translate that as bringing light into my darkness, or bringing understanding into my ignorance, something like that.
Right. And I guess that's also the part that we work with in psychology, which is where we focus it a little bit more on values, right? And I think yoga has yam and niyam to help with that. Um, in that the self-awareness then allows us the journey of the therapeutic process allows us to have more self-awareness of the choices that we're making, which we probably inherited unconsciously, subconsciously. Of course, we don't talk about the soul, but from based on the family of origin and the culture that you're a part of, and that many of us don't question it at all. We just take it on because this is what it is, or this is what I've been given. And in many cultures, it is you do it because that's what your parents have said, or that's what your family did, because we're a collective culture, for example, that everyone does it because that's the caste you follow, or that's the class you come from, or,
Right. Right.
say religion, for example, right? There is all of that that then gets thing, and then you don't question. And then knowledge or your responsibility to learn, um, because all of these, where in psychology we talk about, are also learning situations. Ignorance, you will do something, but the responsibility to learn from that, so that it transforms future choices that you make, comes from one's capacity to learn, the opportunity to learn, and the need to learn, and whether there is that openness to learning,
Mm.
and whether I'm able to see that there is no excuse here, there is something that I need to learn from this particular situation,
Right.
and that I can sit with that, and understand what that is, and whether that is a gift, which it definitely is, to raise some amount of awareness of making choices slightly more from consciousness rather than, indoctrination or compulsion or conditioning,
Mhm.
right? And none of us really question our conditioning much.
Right.
We just take it on and say, this is what I was told, and so this is how I will do it. And that takes away then the responsibility and, accountability for the choices and the consequences, because then it's easy to blame. But this is what I was told, and this is what I was taught, and this is what this one said, and this is what that one said. And that then takes away the whole, experience of growth and evolution, of learning, and taking responsibility, which is a part of human development, right? And it just
Yes.
becomes this, almost this cycle of karma then. And I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
yes.
easier to find excuse, right? And say,
Mhm.
well, it's because that's how I was raised, or and the thing is, we don't challenge each other because I have my own challenges and I have my own um, habits, karmic habits and addictions. So I'm not going to tell you anything about your karmic habits and addictions because I don't want to be confronted about mine. So we are friends, we are happy, we are together in the same club, and we all allow each other our own vices, right? Rather than help each other grow by, sharing what we know and understanding so that we can find a different a different way to respond, really. I mean, responsibility, ability to respond, you mentioned, right? So
Yes.
if I have the ability to respond, that's also my responsibility. So if I can change something, even if it's always been done the same in that way because of culture or tradition or whatever, even if everybody around me does the same, if I have the capacity to change that, I'm responsible to do that change as well. So, for example, going back to the food, I remember when I was in university and I met a friend of mine, Kay, and she told me she had been vegetarian since she was a child. And I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, that's quite amazing." I was at your parents said, no, my parents didn't like me to be vegetarian. I decided not to eat meat. And I was like, how did you do it? So,
Mhm.
well, they said they would not cook for me. They said that if I wanted to be vegetarian, I would have to do it on my own and I would have to provide for myself all my food. So since I was little, I cooked always for myself. We were like amazed and shocked and also surprised, but in a nice way that we can do this even when we are little, even when we are children. We have a greater amount of influence that we believe that we have, and amount and a capacity to change things even when everything. I mean, a child, that you don't. She would have to get her own food, cook her own food, take care of everything on top of studying and whatever she was doing. And you would think that's not within the capacity of a child. The parents are the ones who are providing for the child, and yet she did it. So in a way, that was proving that we can do much more than we believe that we can, even when we feel that society, the pressure of the culture, or the pressure of the family, or those around us is too strong. Well, we actually can change much more than we believe that we can.
Yeah. And I think that's such an important thing, because most of us, there is a correlation between, pressure, fear of consequence, punishment, and responsibility.
Hmm.
And I see this a lot, that when I ask a client, or when we're talking about what we're all trying to control the outcome, control the punishment. Our focus is so much there and far less on what we are doing. and realizing that what we're doing will actually impact in some ways a certain amount the outcome, but there are a lot of things out of our control. But growing up, and that's where this whole journey begins, that um, the nature of reward and punishment impacts our ability sometimes to take responsibility, because so much of our cultures become punishing rather than learning, right? That noticing that we're moving further away from taking responsibility and accountability, and operating so much more from fear than consciousness, or even conscious that I'm afraid and therefore I'm behaving this way, and therefore, and that there is this increased sense of powerlessness.
Sense
uh,
of what?
Powerlessness, choicelessness, a belief that I'm choiceless, a belief that I have no power, and
Mhm.
I'm trying to control everyone outside me, um, instead of looking inward and having the capacity to say, okay, fine, if I want a different outcome, I need to change the input, right? And my input is constantly the same, and I'm not able to really sit with myself and saying, what is my input that's giving me that output? We're only fixated on getting a different output without really looking at the input,
Right.
and then I don't want to take responsibility for that input. And
Mm.
that's somehow where we're kind of stuck as individuals, as humans, on this journey of not having the capacity to take that step of, okay, I'm responsible for my and for the consequences of my thought, my word, my action, my choice. And choice is a big word. You're choosing every moment, every second, and yet there's what I'm hearing today is a larger narrative of choicelessness and powerlessness because of the ignorance that I am responsible for what is happening. And I think
Right.
that was a really big shift for me on this journey, yogic journey, um, to recognize that I'm, an active participant in what I'm creating with the choices that I'm making. Um,
Yes, you're touching upon a few very, very important points. Um, Going to the last one, and then I'll come back and pick up another one that you mentioned. The last one, I'm thinking constantly about my daughters, how to raise them in a healthy, conscious way. And I really don't believe in punishments. I really believe it doesn't have any benefit in the long term. On the short term, I can see how many parents utilize them to get the result that they want. But in the long term, it's going to create a wrong habit. You're talking about people doing things out of fear because of the punishment. So um, from my perspective, I've tried since they were born, since they were very little, to let them know that there are consequences to actions. So, for example, if they delay too much in doing something that they have to do, and they are playing around, and I've already told them 1, 2, 3 times that they had to do that thing, I'm not going to say it anymore. They are going to be responsible though. So when they come to me and they ask me whether they can watch TV or whether they want a little story before going to bed, which, we always go for the story and so on. But if they didn't do the things that they had to do, and I checked with them and they heard me when I said, do you know that you have to do this? Yes. Make sure that you do it on time. They don't do it on time. Now it's not about a punishment. You cannot watch TV because you didn't do that. It's about, look, there is a certain amount of time. We have to go to bed before a certain hour so that you can wake up refreshed. You are not too tired the next day. And you chose to spend longer time playing with that. And it's fine. It's okay. I mean, I told you 3 times you didn't want to go and do this other thing you had to do. Well, now you have to do this other thing, like the shower, for example. You have to take the shower. And today we're not going to have time for the TV. So if you want to watch TV, you're going to have to allocate it within your schedule. And it's fine with me. If you don't want to watch TV, it's okay. But make sure that you have enough time if you want to watch TV. And every day they like to watch like 20 minutes or something, some episodes that they like on TV, but they can only do that if they've been responsible. So hopefully what I'm conveying there is that they are not I'm not going to create a culture of guilt that if you do something wrong, you're going to be punished for that. However, every action has a consequence. And this ties in with the other concept that I wanted to point out, something that I'm glad that you brought it up, this concept of guilt, because we talked about forgiveness on the day that we were talking about karma and the day before. But then some people will, if they heard that podcast that we did on forgiveness and they have been starting to apply to themselves, that recognize, accept, and agree, and whatever happens to me is part of my karma, and so on, then they may experience something of a paradox where they say, well, hold on, because if somebody does something that is nasty, something that is try to take advantage of me or abuse my trust or whatever, and I'm just gonna forgive them, that's gonna create even more problems, right? Because you create that habit into which you are the nice person who forgives anyone, so everybody takes advantage of you. So here we come into the concept of, okay, there is no guilt, right? If you forgive, the guilt is gone, right? You let it go. You choose not to be the victim, so they are not the guilty one, and so you fully let go of the need to be compensated for that, right? So I'm not going to take it like they are guilty. I'm not going to punish them. I'm not going to seek for them to feel bad about what they did. However, there is responsibility. They did some actions. They caused some suffering, or they caused some trouble, or they abused my trust, something like that. Well, that's going to be a consequence. It doesn't mean that, well, I forgive them because they didn't know better. So, they abused my trust. Now they betrayed me in some way. And now I'm going to just forgive them and go on. Okay, I'm going to forgive them, but I'm not going to just go on. The trust has to be earned. And if they break the trust in some way, then they're not going to engage into that kind of, um, you know, collaboration or cooperation behavior that we used to have before. I mean, we start anytime with somebody that we don't know, we give them the benefit of the doubt, and we start from a good face, like the good face, right? We show the good face. But if that trust is betrayed in some way, I'm not just going to forgive and continue. I'm going to make them accountable for that. And I'm going to let them know that was not okay. What you did was not okay. This is what happened. This is the consequences of what you did. Now, there are consequences, so you're accountable for those. It doesn't mean I'm going to make them feel guilty and I'm going to punish them, but there is going to be responsibility. And also for myself. So I can forgive myself for whatever I did. I did something wrong. I feel that I caused a lot of trouble, or I created a number of issues. Okay, what I do? I forgive myself. I'm not going to feel guilty about it, but what's my responsibility? What can I do? What can I, does it require me to change something out there? Do I have to pay the broken dishes? Do I have to do something to deal with the consequences of what I created? Then I will do that. That I'm going to hold myself accountable for that. But it's important to mention that, because otherwise, just the culture of forgiveness and not bringing in the accountability, that creates weak people who everybody steps on, and you are constantly feeling like, yeah, I feel I'm a good person because I'm forgiving everyone, but everybody keeps abusing me. Everybody keeps taking advantage of me. Everybody, I'm always the last one in the line. Well, oh yeah, but you go ahead, you go ahead. What's this? This is not humility. That's humiliation. So yeah, that was an important point.
Yeah. So I think anything on an extreme is, and it's finding that space of balance and boundaries that come with the acceptance of what has happened, and yet there will be maybe a change in behavior or a change in the relationship or something, but there will be consequences and accountability to accept what that takes, uh, that comes with that whole experience. And I think that's important, like you said, that there is accountability and there will be consequences, but the consequences are not always punishment.
Right.
And I think that's so important because I think most people, especially if you come from the world of a country like ours where karma is considered a punishment, right? Then there's so much of fear around it that somehow if I didn't take accountability and responsibility, then it's not my karma. Like there is this illusion of evasion or escapism that occurs,
Right.
because I'm just so afraid of the punishment. And then in that ignorance, I become the victim.
Well, who are you fooling, right? Because
And that's the
in
big question. Yeah.
in some way, in some level, we know what we did. So we
Mm.
can try to pretend and lie and show a different face to the world, but at some level we know. And it doesn't matter. I mean, whether we accept the consequences or not, they are gonna come. Karma is that I mean, that's why I asked you about fairness before, because karma doesn't play the game of fair or not fair. Things are as they are. You do something, it has a consequence. The amount of consciousness with which you do the action is going to have an effect, like at the child eating meat or the adult eating meat. But consequences are going to come anyway. Karma is fair in that way, in that concept. Now, whether you lie to yourself and pretend that you did and find excuses and scapegoats and make somebody else notice, no, it wasn't me, it was the other one,
Yeah.
that to believe that that's not going to bring karma, that's just very naive, not realistic at all.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the nature of, I think, where ignorance comes in, that we, and which takes me to the conversation around fate and destiny,
Right,
where when we are unconscious of our actions and then we believe that somebody outside of me has control, and something else is causing me to react and create all of these things, um, then that's my fate, and I live here saying this is my fate, right? Which is when you let, I mean, at least the way we see it is that you let other people and external circumstances dictate the direction of your life, and you think you're choiceless and powerless again. And I, therefore, not taking responsibility because someone else has control. And in many times we think of something outside, more powerful, etc., and that cannot be changed. And there's a submissive sort of approach to fate versus, from what we understand, and I'd love to hear the yogic perspective of destiny, is when you are willing to take that responsibility with consciousness of how you are creating your personal choices to get a sense of direction for your life, which is taking responsibility for the consequence with consciousness for the kind of life you want to create. And then destiny becomes something that you are creating by being in the present moment, whereas fate comes from this belief that I am choiceless and powerless and somebody else is doing it, and so I just have to face it.
right. Okay. Well, here is a point where we are quite different. The understanding of fate and destiny from the yogic perspective is not the same as what you are describing. Let me point out the differences as also as I understand it. So you are describing fate as when you are not taking the reins of your own life, and you're letting others choose the things for you, and you are becoming more like a passive actor,
Yeah.
and somebody's writing the script. In the yogic, and the way I understand the yogic teachings is that fate is when whatever is happening in your life and where your life is going is determined by karma,
Mm.
which is quite different from what you're saying, because the karma is yours. It's not what somebody is choosing for my life. Is as a result of the consequence as a result of the actions that I did in the past. So I would explain fate as the where your life is going if you do nothing to change that. And what is going to happen is everything that is occurring in your life is determined by karma.
Mm.
So but indeed, if you let others make choices for you, well, yes, you are a passive actor and it's going to be a continuation of that fate. But the fact that it's fate or destiny is not determined by who is making choices, but actually by whether you are living in a karmic, what we would say is it a karmic life or a dharmic life? So as long as you are leading a karmic life, then your future is a faithful existence. It is determined. It is written down. It is those things which you have created that have to come back and they have to manifest themselves. And maybe part of those consequences is to not make choices and let others take the reins of your life and choose to step back and let others do things. There's a concept in yoga when we talk about 7 steps to happiness or heaven and 7 steps to hell. That's a fascinating topic, maybe for some another time. But just to
Mhm.
mention that the first step to hell is called passive expectancy, and is where you become passive and you let the universe entertain me, let others do the big decisions for me, and I will just do what I have to do and carry on. And that passive attitude is going to have a lot of consequences. So that passivity is the first step going down, let's say. But we are already in a faithful existence as long as we are just living life as the recipients of our karma.
Mm.
So everything that happens, oh, that's my karma. Even good things, yeah, let's remember karma is also the good things, but everything is karmic. Now, destiny. Okay, now we go into destiny. So we talked about karma and dharma the other day. And dharma is when you are aligned with this intelligence that is in the universe and that is guiding me, and also my own nature, my own spirit, the call of my soul. And if I feel the call of my soul to go in a particular direction, if I follow that call of the soul, leading a virtuous life aligned with these universal principles that are around us, then that is a dharmic life. That dharmic life is not solely subjected to karma, but you can actually realign yourself from the things that would eventually happen in your fate, realign them to find a higher destiny.
Mm.
So when you are listening to the call of your soul, which is going to tell you in which direction to go, and you are living in accordance to your nature, in harmony with your nature and the nature around us, things fall into place so that you can move towards your destiny. And so there's this idea of me being a seed. If I'm an acorn seed, right, I can pretend to be. I think we talked about this. I pretend to be a pine tree, and I can try to become a pine tree as much as I want, no matter how much I want. Well, it's not in my nature. I'm an acorn. I'm not gonna be a pine tree. I'm an acorn. So you can be fighting with your fate, because then as long as you are fighting with your nature, then there's going to be a lot of fate happening, and you're going to suffer a lot in that growing of the tree, and then realizing this is not who I want to be, and you don't like yourself and you feel inappropriate and all these things. Or recognize your nature and nurture that nature and allow it to flourish as the beautiful oak tree that you can be. Now, even as an oak tree, that would be your destiny, right? There's different kinds of oak trees, so you can still mold a little bit within the realm of possibilities of what kind of oak tree can I be, and that would be my destiny. So I align myself and I see in which direction can my destiny go, and that's linked to the call of the soul I mentioned, and that has to go with responsibility as well, because if we define responsibility as the ability to respond, and we listen, we open up our ears and we notice all the injustices that are in the world, coming back to the concept of fair, and we see that there is there is, whales being killed in the coast of Japan, no? And there is a caste system in some other country, and there is an earthquake somewhere else, and there is famine in my own neighborhood. There is some people who are starving and they are homeless. And well, ability to respond means, okay, I mean, I can go to a demonstration against the killing of whales. I can go to the earthquake and try to help people who suffer from the earthquake. I can take a flight and go there. I can go to my neighborhood and do some sort of service for the homeless. I cannot be responsible for everything, right? So, yes, I have the ability to respond, but then at the same time, what is the call of my soul? And here's where we have a number of virtues and gifts that are given to us just from where we are in, according to all our past lives and where we are right now. And this is natural to you. So I'm not particularly good dancer, right? But I am okay with speaking and I'm with teaching. I have some qualities that are more aligned with the call of my soul, and those qualities of speaking and teaching and understanding different fragments of information, putting it together to explain it differently, that's something that is for me, and that is the call of my soul. So maybe I don't feel the call to go and protest against whales being killed. I don't feel the call to go and help people out after an earthquake. I mean, if it happens right here, that this is right here, so I'm gonna be there. But I'm not gonna take a flight to go somewhere else because my time can be in service in a different way. So I can take responsibility for these gifts that are already within me and shape the oak tree in my particular way. So I'm a teacher. So that this is part of me and this is how I do service. So can I shape how this is going to manifest and choose that path of destiny itself? All right, that was a long explanation. I feel like I've been talking for a few minutes. So
No, thank you so much for clarifying that. Um, because that takes me back to this thing that we started with knowledge, and in that case, self-knowledge.
self-knowledge, right?
Yeah, and self-awareness and ignorance. And are we sitting in that space to fully understand what is the call of my soul and my destiny? Because um, all of us think that life is a certain, these are the 5 things I have to do in life. And if
Mm,
I've done it, I've done life. Go to
right.
school, go to college, get a job, get married, have children. I've done life,
Mm.
right? Um,
And
versus
these are set up from the outside, like you were saying, somebody making choices for us. They are telling us you have to do these things. So you put them in a list and you are crossing them. And as you are getting to the end, you are like, is this all what life is about? What will happen when I finish the list, right?
exactly. And I think somewhere in my life, in my 30s, I was like, this can't be life. Everyone cannot be doing the same thing and calling it a life. There's got to be something else. This cannot be life. We can't have come here and all done the same thing and said this is life. And there is a human suffering that is part of it, but this cannot be life. you know and that was what really triggered something in me, which was this journey of inquiry and discovery, and really questioning, who am I, why am I here, and is this the life that I was born to? This soul has reincarnated in this time, or is this why I am here? Like, what am I here you know beyond, yes, choosing to have a child or marriage is choices, yeah. But we are told this is what life is, this is what you have to do, and if you don't do it, then you're not, and you've not lived your life, you're not doing what you're here to do.
Right.
And there is such a disconnection then from the soul that is occurring, that we are not fully living to becoming that oak tree. um, we're an oak tree thinking we're pine, and then that's the confusion and the conflict within us. And it the reason why I'm saying this, it brings me back to the original thing of self-knowledge and knowledge and the responsibility that when we are aware of the knowledge of who we are, what we believe in, our values, at least from a psychology perspective, that's how we talk about it. Then there is more of a self initiation to take responsibility and make those choices with that level of knowledge. And it talks about freedom in that case, that freedom is then the degree to act in pursuit of those values. In the understanding that their values are coming from an expression of who we are and our true self or our essence or the soul, right? And that's such a different. And then when you stand by your, whether it's your word or your responsibility or your action, then there is a different charge to that. There's a different energy to that. Then you're, and I'm also kind of saying this from my own experience a little bit. When it was listed down and I was going by this list, it just felt like this is not my list. This is not, why has this been handed to me and why am I being told to go along this list? And is that all there is? Right. And so the
But
invitation.
can I just point out one thing though? Because that knowledge, this self-knowledge is not just an intellectual understanding.
Mm,
It's an experience, right? Yeah. Yes, all philosophies of the world speak about this. Who am I? And know yourself. But it's not just about something happening in the mind. It's an experience of the self.
mm,
This is where yoga brings the meditation, the aspect of meditation as going within and connecting with that self. Because I remember something that you mentioned before when you were describing destiny as something that we create, but we don't really create the acorn,
mm,
right? The acorn is already there, and you have to first realize, oh, I'm an acorn. That's the
mm,
self-knowledge. From that place of self-knowledge, then you can shape a little bit how is that going to be manifesting. But you are an acorn, right? So how much we create, actually very, very little, because we have the illusion that we create a lot. We are fantastic creatures, humans, and we love to create things. But actually, a lot of it is, how much of that is free will and how much of that is actually possible. If you want to create your own destiny, like the law of attraction and the book of the secret and all that, you cannot just write anything you want and make it manifest. That's not
mm,
going to work. If it's not within the capacities of your acorn, you can wish as much as you want to be a pine tree, and that's going to just bring more confusion. You can be as proactively dedicated to develop the values of a pine tree, right? Like you were saying, values. But that's not going to work. And actually, you're going to be in conflict with yourself. That's why this idea, everything stems from avidya, the ignorance.
mm,
The ego is right on top of that. So first we have to go down to, we would say, the vidya, right? That the name of the Vedas, the ancient texts are for that. This is about knowing who I am. Okay, that's myself. Recognize that. Now can I manifest it? Now how can I make it manifest into the destiny?
right. Yeah, which is what I was coming to, that it's not an egoic understanding of who I am, which in a lot of people is defined and finite when they say this is who I am, this is my personality. It's a deeper experience of the essence of the self.
Yes.
Um, and it's a quiet, a more intimate experience when you're in a meditative state to fully come in contact and connection with that. And then
Correct.
when
It's not even about saying I am not the ego, I am the soul, because those are just words.
yeah,
It's not an intellectual thought.
yeah,
It's an experience.
it's an experience.
Right.
And you can't think yourself into it. It's
Right.
when you sit thoughtlessly, that's when you actually begin to sort of fully experience the essence of our true nature,
Right.
uh, the nature around us. And then the reason why I said the creation is because then you're able to see, um, the reason why I said is that we create the destiny is because then we're able to come into that experience of nurturing all aspects of ourselves to operate from there. Uh,
Yes.
and then it's not so much about um, it's about that responsibility then to be the acorn that you are, and then you create that, and that's your destiny, and then you operate from that space. And I think maybe the I don't know if I'm explaining it correct, or if it's landing in the way I'm explaining it.
Yes.
And then it's not really, then there isn't that fear of consequence. Then you're taking that on as a natural progression for whatever we do, and there's a different level of flow to that. I do that I have experienced in the shift of when you're operating from the ego and the mind and the thought and trying to, sort of show up with your masks and these external things to fit into a version that we think we need to be, versus when you're operating from that conscious space of truth, of essence.
Right. It's also beyond the guilt and the shame and the punishments and all that as well, because that also plays a role. Because if I, I'm surrounded by this culture of shame and guilt and punishment, then I'm gonna be afraid of making mistakes. And if
Mm.
I'm trying to find out who I am, I'm gonna have to leave my comfortable self of how I pretend to be, usually to the world, to explore that who I am. And to
Mm.
explore that, I'm going to make mistakes. That's part of growing. But then if I am in this culture of, shame and guilt and all that, it's going to be much harder for me to choose to do that and make those mistakes.
Yeah.
Mistakes are very, very important. It's really good to do mistakes. It's excellent, right? But if I'm going to be punished for them, I'm going to think it twice, right? So the first we have to deal with that concept of guilt and shame and punishment. That's why, coming back to those conversations we had before, we were saying the first step in the spiritual path is forgiveness. Because if you don't start from there, then let's say we come to the point where we are talking about today now, and yes, I want to take responsibility for myself, and I want to, find out who I truly am. But if I make a mistake, I'm going to be punished. So that's going to be a hurdle in my approach already. I want to explore who I am, but I don't want to make any mistake. So that's not going to work.
Yeah, and it's such an important thing that you brought up, because in the world today, there's so much around perfection, right?
Yes.
And that there's so much that I notice around us, whether the undertone is that if you're not perfect, there's something wrong with you. And somehow we're chasing this perfection that does not exist in the human experience. We're imperfectly perfect, right?
It
Like,
only it only exists in Instagram.
yeah. And so much of where we live today is there.
Yeah.
And so we keep coming back to the shame and the guilt and the punishment and the judgment that we're all very afraid of, therefore, then showing up authentically. Showing up saying, I made a mistake, you know, and to have that compassion to say, it's a part of the learning experience. That if I don't make the mistake, how am I going to learn who I am, or what is, it's natural to do that.
Yeah,
And
it's
there
important.
are consequences, but
Yeah.
that's the journey of learning, and the punishment is the scary one.
Yeah,
And so
it's
fear
good to
of
have an
yeah.
environment where we can make mistakes. Some friends, colleagues, community that can allow you to explore and experiment and fail as well. And they're not going to take it too much. They are not going to make it harder on you, and they're not going to punish you too much for those mistakes.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the whole conversation around holding space with compassion.
Yep.
Um, where there is space of safety to make those mistakes. Otherwise, we aren't safe to make those mistakes. And safety is such a big part of growth. It's such a big part of having that sangha or that community that can hold space while you are, showing up, um, messy, imperfect, whatever it is, while we're growing out of what we think we need to be, uh, into who we are.
You know, you're just reminding me something, how important is to travel,
Mm,
because how am I getting there? We are talking about fear, and fear to be ourselves, and fear to discover who we are because of making mistakes. Now, yesterday was Halloween,
mm,
and I was doing a video about Halloween the other day on YouTube to talk about how there's something lovely about Halloween, which is that we put on a mask, but actually we are removing a mask, right?
mm,
As we are putting a mask and exploring the monster side of ourselves, the shadow side, then we can find things in that shadow which are very powerful and very useful for ourselves, that we pretend that they don't exist, and we just pretend to be this holy, this marvelous, wonderful person, right? This is the face that we give to the world. And within, we feel like a monster. Now, on Halloween, we are allowed to
mm.
bring the monster out. And that's so lovely, because we can explore, how does it feel to bring my vampire outside, or my witch, you know?
Yeah.
And it's an opportunity, because everybody's going to accept you becoming like a witch. And you
Mm,
can make it a game. A game is the best way to learn, making it a game. So Halloween is a lovely, lovely celebration of the shadow, and exploring the shadow in a lovely way. I'm sure from psychology you can tell me more about that concept and what happens when we do that. But certainly, to have that environment where they allow you to do that one day a year is wonderful. Now, what I was saying about traveling is an excellent substitute for Halloween, because let's say I go to Japan and I'm so different from them that I can explore new ways of being myself, and they will not notice because they don't know me, and they will not notice I'm doing strange things because it's such a foreign culture. So they will say, "Oh, he's the foreigner, that's why he's doing that," and they will have a greater margin of compassion, like you were saying, but I'm not. I mean, if they saw me doing this in Spain, everybody in Spain will look at me and say, "This guy is weird," right? So I'm not being like a regular Spanish person in Japan. I'm exploring a new way of being, but because I'm away from my home, they allow me to do that. So traveling is an excellent way not only to meet other cultures and explore different ways of being, but also to rediscover yourself. I'm not going to say reinvent, but rediscover yourself, and take off masks by faking it, fake it to make it. So I'm going to pretend to be like this, see if it works. I'm going to pretend to be an acorn, or like an oak tree, and maybe I discover I'm not an oak tree. All right, I pretend to be a palm tree. Let's see if it works, right? So we explore that. Where is my destiny going? Let's say.
yeah, that's beautiful. I think the opportunity to explore different parts of ourselves, um, and that's the greatest part of psychology and shadow work, right? Which is those parts of ourselves that we reject, or we were told at some point in our life are not okay, and they exist. Jealousy, greed, anger, they exist in all of us. And maybe growing up, you were saying, "Oh, you're so selfish," and "Oh, you're so greedy," and I shut that out. But it was also a part of me that was probably exploring and curious to know more. But there was a judgment that came across, and I said, "Okay, fine. That part of me is not okay. I have to reject that part."
Right.
And that part goes into the shadow. And
And it was necessary. Let's not now feel guilty because we did that. It was necessary to live in culture, in society, to have the approval of your parents and your community. You had to do that, right? But now we are adults. Now we can choose what part of me, what did it mean to be greedy? what was that? Was that just evil, or was there something else behind? What does it mean to be selfish? Is it just being an egocentric, or is it being self-centric, which is not the same? So we can explore that shadow part, and there is some gifts within it that when we uh, make it disappear, we lose that as well.
Yeah. So we see them as when they're burdened with those beliefs. I'm greedy, or I'm selfish, or and that when you sit and explore that and unburden that belief, that I'm greedy or I'm selfish. So what was the child actually trying to do at that point of time? And you may find this gift of, say, curiosity or exploration, or had a very sort of imaginary sort of space, and had imagination that then got locked away, and then you're bringing that back, and that in some ways you start coming back to what I call lost parts of yourself, and you start integrating that into that experience of, I'm okay, I'm enough, because
Mm.
that's where a lot of our work is this fear that there's something wrong with me, and therefore I'm not taking responsibility, because if I do something wrong, there'll be punishment, and I'm always doing something. So many things that we take on as limiting beliefs as part of our quote unquote identity, that we
So,
still.
so how would you do it in psychology? Somebody who is, repressing that aspect of themselves, whether it's greed or something, and how would you approach it as an adult?
So we look that emotions get lodged in the body. And so we would ask them to identify where they feel the guilt, or where they feel this aspect or this emotion that shows up when they believe they're selfish. And we go to that emotion, and then we sort of meet the child, the memory, that at the point that they took that on, and sort of unravel it in terms of, truth. Is it the truth? Like, what was the child really trying to do? Um, and Sort of unburden is what the process is called. It's an unburdening process of looking at the possibility of who this child may be if he didn't have that belief, and how is that
Mm.
serving them today. And if the child didn't, what could the alternate belief be? Oh, he was just trying to explore something, or he was taking his stuff because he always had to kind of give his stuff away to his brother or his sister, and this time he was protecting, so it came from a role of protection. Okay, does is that, and then you take away the guilt and the shame from that behavior, and the punishing sort of thing, and you see it from a space of compassion and forgiveness for the child, and for whatever was happening, and sort of the child then can the person can release and see the child from a different lens and perception, perspective, and say, oh yeah, he was just being a child, and he got labeled or she got labeled, and yeah, okay, that's maybe not the truth. And then you explore that, and that you notice a sense of release that happens in the person, that guilt starts to, that's lodged in the body, starts to, um what is it, discharge, and then you notice an expansion that occurs, um and a new way of being becomes possible, because now there's space for possibility that was once blocked with that trauma or belief or narrative.
Ah,
Yeah.
that's lovely. That sounds really inspiring. That's through the compassionate inquiry, right?
Mhm. Yes.
Ah, that's really nice. And I love the term that you used, unburdening, because you can feel it, yeah, all the constrictions, all the weight in the body, and then unburdening, and the body feels light.
Yeah.
And light being light also illuminates, right? So you are going into the shadow, and you are shining the light, and you realize the snake was not a snake, it was a rope.
Yeah.
Oh, I can use a rope to tie things up and to do many good things. So it's not a snake, it's not going to bite me. It's not, that little, what was I, was that, what was the original emotion that was, greed? Yeah, it's not, it wasn't greed. I was protecting. And that's a nice rope. That's a strong rope. I can do things with that protection, right?
Yeah.
And maybe that's part of my identity. That and you bring light into the darkness, and the avidya, the ignorance, dispels. That's a lovely, lovely metaphor. That's really nice.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
I think the journey, now that you say that, is so much about bringing the light to the ignorance. And the more we do that, there is more like sort of a separation, because then you're able to witness these things, and then there becomes a separation from these narratives and beliefs. And you're coming closer into that space of neutrality and conscious observation of what is really happening. Where is this narrative from? And I'm not this narrative.
Is there any narrative that is not a burden?
I don't think so.
So when you say narratives, they are really like karmic beliefs, values that we hold on to, and
Yeah,
then they are
stories,
heavy on
right?
us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that everybody does this to me. I'm the weak one. I'm the victim. These
right.
become narratives, and then your narratives drive so much of your behaviors,
Because you
right?
wouldn't call a narrative when, let's say, you were a child and another child was in a difficult situation, and you went and you protect the other child, and then you create that a story. Oh, I'm a protector, which it could be a healthy thing that you develop, and it can bring you, maybe you become a fireman or you become a whatever, no?
Yeah.
So would you call that narrative, or would you call that something else?
We also look at, okay, what was the positive intent? And therefore, how did it become a part of you and a part of a positive part of you? And but usually we look, when somebody comes in, they're really looking at not the, oh, I went and helped a child and now I've become the protector. It's usually, oh, the child was getting beaten and I went and protected. So now I think that I am everybody's savior. And okay, fine. So how is that sort of showing up in your life? And yeah, we look at, okay, more I don't know why I'm always doing this. This is who I am. Now I want to explore it because it's not serving me anymore.
Right.
So that
Yeah,
behavior.
I think that's also that's probably also the challenging position in which you are as a psychologist, because people go to you generally when they have problems, not when they have something working really well for them. And it's look, I have these gifts in my life, and these stories that were wonderful, and I am growing in my. Can you please come? And generally come with the problem, and the guilt, and the burdens, and the heaviness, and the shadow, right?
Yeah.
But why,
Yeah.
Guru?
But I think the beauty with compassionate inquiry has been that even in that burden, you're able to see the positive intent of it, of whatever that behavior is, and
Right.
it's usually to protect the child. It was about survival. It was, about not knowing any better. It was about largely survival. It boils down to, survival, especially when we work with trauma. That's what it comes down to, and you realize how um, imaginative, creative the human child is to able to come up with those ways of taking care of themselves,
Mm.
and see the capacity of a human's mind, intellect, that okay, I made up this story because that was the only way I knew how to survive, right? And then you see the positive intent, and then there is just no guilt and shame to that. And then that's just unburdening and a beautiful experience. To even in that, there is no guilt and shame. You did it out of survival. um, and that empowers the person to see that even in that there is a gift. So it doesn't make anything wrong per se. It says that there was a intent that was at that time served a child, but may not. But that narrative is no longer true. And so then you look back at the narrative and the limiting belief that the child took on at that time to survive, that no longer is their truth today. So
Mm.
then in that, you're also releasing the past and allowing the person to able to live more in their truth today, where their choices are more aligned to a more conscious experience of self rather than a past version knocking at the door. Yeah.
Excellent. Very good.
So,
Nice. Where is this taking us? What's going to be next week's conversation, Seba?
so next week, we are talking about power over versus power within.
Hmm. All right.
Conversation on power, which I think is beautiful because that's such an interesting. Um, I think so much of it is around power. And this whole conversation we had today was about choicelessness, powerlessness, and where does that come from? So yeah, I'm really looking forward to actually that conversation with you, Ardasji.
Excellent. Let's have an empowering conversation next week.
Yes,
Thank,
thank you
thank
so
you
much.
everyone for watching and thank you Satseva for organizing this.
Thank you, Ardasji, for being with us here from Portugal. We'll see you next Friday at 5:30 India time, 12 Portugal time. Is it now?
Yes, yes,
12
yes.
o'clock Portugal time. Please come in with your questions, interact with us. We'd be really happy to answer anything that you have. Or you can send us in your questions beforehand. You can write in to us, admin at safe-space.in. We're happy to take your questions. And we look forward to seeing you next week. And happy Diwali from us.